Hello guys, and welcome to another tutorial. This tutorial is going to cover a Byte and its wrapper class. I'm going to be breaking down these tutorials, each one for a specific primitive type and its wrapper class. So today we're going to be looking at Byte. Alright, so I've gone ahead and created a project in IntelliJ IDEA called Java for Beginners. You can use IntelliJ IDEA or you can use Eclipse. The reason why I kind of left Visual Studio Code is because I want to be able to just compile things right in the IDE. You can do that, but it's easier here because for some reason I can scroll and you can see the results a lot more clearly, and so I figured that would be a best option just to use IntelliJ. But if you want to use IntelliJ or you want to use Eclipse, you can download that from their website. If you want to keep using Visual Studio Code, go ahead and just use the terminal to compile your code. Alright, so what we're going to do here is I'm going to create packages so that we can keep all of our projects inside of this Java for Beginners project, and so that we don't have to really go in between things. So I'm going to do is create primitive.type, and this is going to be where our class is going to be stored. And this is pretty much going to be the package, right, which is going to be the folders that is stored. So under source is going to be a folder called primitive, and then there's going to be another folder inside of primitive called type. All right, so we have a subfolder inside of a subfolder. So what I want to do next is going to create a Java class. I'm going to call this primitive Byte, okay, because we're dealing with Byte today. All right, so Java primitive types have operations that we can do on them. Almost all types, we can add them, we can multiply them, we can divide them, and we can get their remainders. So what I want to do is use methods, which are ways that we can actually reduce, or we can manage our code, right, into smaller parts so that we don't get lost. Typically with functions, what you want to do with functions is if you need something that you need to do repeatedly, what you want to do is you want to use methods or functions depending on what programming language you're using. All right, so what I want to do is we want to create a bunch of methods inside of this primitive class that we can do things like addition, subtraction, division, and getting the remainder between 2 bytes. All right, so what I want to do first is let's go ahead and just create our main. Because we need main to run our application. And remember that you can also declare the strings array with brackets as well. So what I want to do here is we want to create a private static byte, and for a method called addition, and this is going to take in 2 bytes. It's going to take in byte A and byte B as parameters. All right, so parameters are things that we pass into a method so that we can use them to do work or complete the task. All right, so what I want to do here is we want to sum these 2 bytes that we're getting, right? So what we need is we need a variable, and I'm going to call this variable summation, because now we're creating a byte, right? We're creating a byte variable. So think of a variable as a box that we can store information, right? That variable, that box has a name, and the name of that box is called summation. Right now, this summation has nothing in it. To give the box a value, you normally use the equal to sign, right? And then you would give the value 0. So now summation has a value stored inside of it, which is 0. So if we wanted to go ahead and actually print out the value in summation, we use the name of the box. All right, and since we're returning a byte here, I'm just going to go ahead here and return 0, and it should be fine for now. So I just want to show you guys that the value inside of summation is 0, and that we're not just printing out summation itself. So let's go here, do s out, and I'm going to go ahead and use addition. Since addition, it requires 2 bytes, I'm just going to pass in 0 and 0. Okay, but the problem is going to throw an error because for some reason it would think that we're probably given an int. So what we have to do typecasting. So we're going to typecast this to a byte. All right, and we're going to typecast this to a byte as well. So now we've done that. You can see that fixes the problem. So let's go ahead and run this for a second. And you guys can see that we are given the value 0 and 0. The reason why I'm giving the value 0 and 0 because this brings 0 for our summation value, which is 0, and then this return is 0 as well. If I were to put 2 here and I went ahead and ran this again, you guys can see that the first value is 0, but the value that we returned, which was a byte here, is 2, right? So that brings that 2 as well. So this is called a return type. So the type that we're returning is of type byte, right? So normally you have a bunch of return types. You have floating point return types, which will be float or double, and you have whole numbers, which are integral parts, which will be byte, short, int, or long. Okay, and this time we're only dealing with byte, so most of the return types are going to be in byte. Once we're dealing with comparisons, we're going to be using booleans for that. All right, but what we're doing here, we want to add two of these 2 bytes together, A and B. So what we're going to do is we're going to say that summation, right, is going to equal, and since for some reason it's treating this as an int, what we have to do here is we have to cast this. So I'm going to cast this to a byte, and then I'm going to say that we're going to return, we want to add in A plus B, right? So now that we have that, and since this is, we are reinitializing this down here, it's redundant. So what we want to do is we can create a box here, and then we can initialize it somewhere else. So once we have that initialized, we can go ahead and just return summation, right? And now return summation, we're done. So now we can come back here and use this addition here. Let's put in 4 and 7. So what is 4 plus 7? It's 11, all right? So now when we add, we get 11. But what I want to do is I want to make this descriptive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to concatenate a string, and I'm going to say this is addition, right? So a string is a combination of characters, right? And this is used to store things like your name, your address, your social security number, and all that good stuff. So what we can do is we can concatenate and say, okay, well, what we're doing here is addition by giving a description here. So now when we run that, you can see that it says addition, and then it gives us 11. All right. So now what I want to do is we want to subtract. Right? So we're going to go ahead here and create another private method. This is going to be static. This is going to be of type byte for the return type, and we're going to call this subtraction. And this is going to take in byte A and byte B. Right. So now that we have A and B, what we can do is subtract. So the reason why I did this before is because I wanted to show you guys how to create a byte variable, how to initialize a byte variable, and how to return that variable. So now what we can do is we can just do something simple and say return. So you have that, and what we want to do is we want to go ahead and do the casting like we before, and now we want to say A minus B. And you see our code is a lot more simpler than creating a variable, then going through the steps to actually do the operation and then returning that. We can do all of this in one short line. And now that we have that, let's go down here, copy this, Control C, Control V, and now I'm going to change this to subtraction. And I'm going to change this to subtraction. All right. So now we have 4 and 7, subtract that, you get -3. So I'm gonna go ahead and run this. And you see we get -3. So what we're gonna do next is we probably want to get, or want to multiply, right? So we can go ahead here and create another private method. So I can just copy this. I'm gonna paste this, and it's gonna say this is redundant because he has 2 copies of it. But we're going to change this to multiplication. All right, and what I want to do is we want to change this to an asterisk because that's what's used for multiplication. And then we go down here and we can just copy this as well, paste it, and we can change this to multiplication. multiplication, and then we change this to multiplication, and we just leave that values, so we can go ahead here and run that. And you guys can see that we multiplication, we get 28. So now what we want to do is we want to get the remainder. All right, so to get the remainder, what we typically would use is we use a modulo symbol, which is the percent sign. Control Z. Let's mess that up. Control C. All right, so with this part right here, I'm going to call this remainder. They might call that modulo, but this is what it returns. It returns the remainder between two values. So what we do is we do mod. So it's called modulo. All right, so we're going to say, normally we say A mod B. All right, so get the remainder if A divides B. All right, so what we're going to do next is here, I'm going to go ahead and copy this part here, and then I'm going to go ahead here and paste, and then we're going to call this remainder, and then this is going to be remainder. And 4 mod 7 is actually 4 because 4 never divides 7, so you need 3 more divide 7. We have 4, so the remainder of 4 mod 7 is 4. All right, if we had something like 9, so now the remainder would be 2. But let me just go ahead and prove that to you guys. So let's go, for example, here, and let's run this. You guys can see that the remainder is 4 because 4 can divide 7. However, if we had a bigger number like 9, 9 can divide 7, and the remainder is 2, so 9 mod 7 should be 2. So we get 2 here. All right. So what we want to do is next is we actually want to use some of the built-in byte methods that is provided to us by Oracle. So Oracle has these byte methods that we can use to convert things, right? To convert a string to a byte, or to convert a string to a byte, or to take 2 bytes and compare them and see if they're equal or not, and all that good stuff. All right, so what I want to do is we actually want to use those. So I want to introduce you guys how to use methods that are provided to us by libraries. All right, so instead of us creating our own libraries from scratch, it's good to use the ones that have already been provided to us by the Java team. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a method, and what this method is going to do, it's going to convert a string, a number string, to an actual byte. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to create another private method. So we're going to go private, and then we're going to static, and this is going to return a byte. And what I want to do is going to say this is going to be convert from string to byte. I know this is really like long, but so what this is going to do is take in a string. So remember, a string is used to store things like your name, but it can also be used to store in a number, right? And remember, strings are stored in quotations like this. So string name equal to, and then you can give in your name, such as James Bond, right? Or the string last name could be something like who's famous. Let's see, man, I don't know famous people. Let's see. Know what? Whatever. I'll just put Naruto. All right. All right. So that's not a first name, but that works. All right. Like I said, Zumaki. So we have Naruto, but you guys can see that we represent strings inside of double quotation marks, and we can have a bunch of characters, right? And a space, or a space is a character. So what a string is a combination of characters, right? So what I want to do is want to convert a number. So what we can do is we actually have a string. Since we have number inside of our header here, we can say that number, right, is equal to string 24. And what we can do is we can actually write a function that can check to see if this is digit and this is digit. If that's digit, then we can then return that as a byte, right? But we don't want to do that because it's already that functionality has already been provided for us by the Java team. So why would you go ahead and recreate something that's been done for you already? So let's go ahead and actually look at the documentation. And let me pull that up for a second here. And I'm already looking at the Byte class right here. All right. And if you look at the Byte class right here, you can see the Byte class has a bunch of methods here. And we have this decode method here that takes in a string and it returns a byte, right? This Byte class here, it returns type class of bytes, and this is static. All right. And then we have another one here that is value of, that takes in a string and returns byte. All right. However, because of the way that the byte is set, you can actually go from a wrapper class byte to a primitive byte. So what we can do is we can use that value of to get that byte value. Okay. So now that we know that, so what we can do is we can return, and then what we're going to use is the byte wrapper class. All right. Dot, and then value of, and then we pass in number. And now we've just converted a string to a number. The thing is that you have to pass in this number as a right number. If you have things like characters in there that are not numbers, it's gonna go ahead and fail, right? So let's go ahead and actually I just have to write this out. So I'll do s out, and then I'll do string to byte, and then do that, and we can just concatenate. So I'll do what did I save it as? Oh, convert. So I did this as convert string to byte, and what I want to do is I want to pass in 90, right, as the string here. And what this is going to do is going to go ahead and return 90 as an actual value. And if you think that I'm lying to you, what I'm going to do here is multiply this value by 2, because we can't really multiply strings. You can multiply numbers, right? So what this is going to do is return 180 if I rerun it again. So I'm going to rerun that, and we actually get 180. Let's try something. For example, right, let's multiply this by actual value, a string value of 2, and see what happens. First of all, you can see that we can't even do it, because it's going to say, well, we can apply operation multiplication to type string, so it doesn't even work. We can't even try that to begin with. So what we can only do is that, since I'm just trying to prove to you guys it's actually a number and not a string, but you guys can see that because we can multiply a string to a string, we can concatenate a string to a string. So if I concatenated this, if I did this, right, it would actually work. But let's see what that actually gives us. Okay, you see that it gives us 902. The reason is because it printed out 90, and then it said, well, let's just attach 2 to it, right? So when you attach 2 to it, you got 902. So this part of it, I'm just trying to show you guys what happens when you add 2 strings together. You come up with another string and not an actual value. All right, so now that is done, let's write another one. Let's use another method here that we can convert to string. I'm gonna do this right. I'm just gonna go ahead, copy here, and I'm gonna go ahead and paste. And what I'm gonna do here is convert to byte. I'm gonna call this 2 or 3 or whatever. Call this 2. All right. And what I want to do is want to use the byte dot decode method, so we can decode an actual number string to that as well. So let's go back here, and I'm just gonna copy this right here, and I'm gonna go ahead here and paste, and then I'm gonna go ahead now and put 2 here, and I'm still gonna keep the 90, but I'm gonna put this as 3, so you can see that we actually still get that to work. So here we got so it's 903. What just happened? Oh, we added it. We're adding, but this is weird. Give me a second. So this is add. All right, so this is giving us 902 and 903. So let's run this again, and we see that's the reason. So it's concatenating these values, right? The reason is because of the parentheses. So what we have to do is we have to put the parentheses in the right places. So we're gonna go ahead and add an extra parenthesis. We're saying that go ahead and actually do the addition first before you print out everything. So now when we go ahead and actually run this, we should get 92 and 93. And if we did the multiplication now, that should come up to be the right thing. All right. So it's always good to use parentheses where it's needed so you get the right values. All right, so with that said, let's go ahead and actually explore another one. So let's see if we wanted to check to see if two values were equal, right? So what happens is that the Byte class actually has ways for checking things that are equal. So what happens is, let's go ahead and actually create a method, and this is going to be static. And I'm going to use Boolean because Boolean returns true or false. So it's going to be say, okay, is a number equal or not, right? And then we're going to call this is equal. And this is going to take in 2 bytes, all right? So we're going to say byte A and byte B. All right, so now what I want to do is we can use the compare to method here. So we have a compare to method. Let's see if I can find it. So we have a compare to method that compares 2 bytes, right, numerically, and this is static, all right? So when something is static, it means that it belongs to the class. So what we say is byte.compare, and then we pass in the 2 values we want to compare. So what we can do is we can return byte.compare, and we want to pass in A and B, okay? And if that is equal to 0, because this actually returns an int. If you guys look back at this, at the documentation, you see this actually returns an int. If it's equal to 0, that means that these two numbers are actually equal, and if it's not, then they're not. All right, so what we want to do is you can change this number to 0 or 1, it won't matter. So what I want to do is go ahead and actually go ahead and test this. So we're gonna go ahead here, and we're gonna say this is for is equal, and what we want to do is we want to go ahead and just concatenate this so that we get those values. So what I want to do is I'm going to say is equals, I'm going to pass in byte, I'm going to do byte dot value of, and I'm going to use this. So this is another method that we're going to supposed to have looked into, 24. And now this is going to return a byte of 24, and they're going to say another one. We're going to say a byte of value, value of, and this is going to be 24. So these two numbers should be equal, so we should get true, right? So this should be true. So let's go ahead here and run this, and you guys can see that this is true. 24 and 24 are the same, right? So we want to say, for example, if a person is 24 years old, then they can get into this club, all right? Or just say if they're greater than, right, but they're equal. So what you can do is you can check to see greater. Okay, so for example, you can say, for example, is, let's switch this up a little bit, all right? Let's switch this up a little bit, and we can say something like this. We can say that if this is greater than 0, so we just change this now. So we say if A is greater than B, then they can go into a club, right? So now let's go back here and run this. All right, so is A greater than B? No, 24 is not greater than 24, right? So that doesn't work. However, if we were to put in 25 here, and now we run this, so 25 is bigger than 24, so we get true, right? All right, so now let's go ahead and explore the other method here. I get that this tutorial is going to be long, but if you have the time to watch it, go ahead and watch it. So we're going to go ahead, Boolean here, we're going to do is equal, and this is going to be is equal to, and what we're going to do is we're going to use another method. So this is what I want to do is we actually want to use the equals to method, and the equals to method takes the type of 2 bytes. All right, this is going to be the wrapper class itself, byte. So we're going to do A, and we're going to do byte, and we're going to do B. All right, or just switch it around, doesn't really matter how you do it. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to say return A dot equals to B. All right, and this is it. It's going to check to see if A equals B, right? So what we can do now is we can go up here and we can just copy this right here and just go ahead and paste. And now we're going to say is equal. I think I named this 2. All right, so we're going to say if are these 2 equal? The answer is no, because 25 is actually greater than 24, so we should get false for the second part here. So I'll say equals 2 here, and let's go ahead and actually run this. So you guys can see that the equals 2 right here still performs the exact same thing as the compare to. It just does it in a separate way. However, I will likely tell you guys that using compare to and compare are more versatile, and because they check for things like nan than the equals to. Okay, so using compare and compare to should be your go-to. All right, so what I want to do next is we actually want to go ahead and also use the compare to. Okay, go back here, copy this, and we're gonna go ahead and paste this here, and I'm gonna change this to 3. Right, so now what we're gonna do is we want to go ahead and compare. So what we're gonna do here is gonna say A dot compare to, and then we're gonna compare that to B, and we're gonna, it does the same thing as that, so it's gonna be equal to 0. So that's gonna be equal to 0 means that they're equal. So I'm gonna go back here and I'm gonna copy this, and I'm going to go ahead and paste it. So now we have our equals to method 3, and now what we can do is we can just change this to 3, and we can check, say, well, is 25 and 25 equal to each other by using the compare to method. And once we run this, you guys can see that that's actually going to be true. So now we have true for that. All right, so one last thing I want to cover is how to go from one value to another. All right, so what we can do is we use decode, and we also used let's see, what do we use? We used value of, using that. We use decode. All right, so this time let's say we actually have a byte, so we want to go from a byte to a float. So what we can do is create another private method here. I'm going to static here, it's going to be a float, and we're going to call this byte to float. All right, and what it's going to do is take a byte wrapper, and we're going to call this A, right? And now what I want to do is want to go from whatever value we have in this byte to an actual float. All right, so what we can do is we can say return B dot float value. Remember, see right here, we have int value, we have long value, we have short value. We also have toString, which is used to print out stuff as well. We have double value, so you can go in between this and grab this from the byte class, which you can create an instance of the byte of a byte object. So I'm just going to use one here, which is going to be return to float, which is going to be float value, get float value. So what we're going to go back here is going to go ahead here, and we're going to do S out, and I'm going to say let's see, so we're going to do byte to float, and then I'm just going to go ahead here and add that. Right, so do byte to float here, and then we're going to do byte to float, and what we're going to do is we're going to say byte dot, use byte dot value of, and then we're going to do 90, and this should return 9.0 because all we can do, let's do this. All right, so let's do 9.9 and see what happens. So go ahead and run that, and see that throws an error, right? The reason is because that it just will convert first to a byte before it goes into a float. So I wanted to show you guys that. So what we do is we put a 90, that would actually work. All right, so we put 90, and that should return 9.0. All right, guys, this will be it for this tutorial. I hope that this tutorial was informative and you guys learned a lot, and you guys have also learned how to use the byte class a lot more efficiently. The next one is going to be the short, and we're pretty much going to cover almost the same things, maybe a little bit more different methods. But let me guys know if you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you like the video, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good day. Bye bye.